The 2010s were an interesting decade. We laughed, we loved, I cried a lot. And it was also a seismic decade for comic books. Film adaptations have never been more popular, with endless superhero flicks coming out year on year. Last year, Avengers Endgame became the highest grossing film of all time, unadjusted for inflation. Yet despite the mainstream boom period superheroes are currently enjoying, comic books themselves have frequently struggled with declining sales and general interest. In response, the powers that be at both Marvel and DC have seriously upped the ante. Reboots, deaths, civil wars, heroes going villainous, villains getting heroic, and crossovers have all escalated greatly this decade, leading to some seriously insane stuff coming out of our most beloved superheroes' stories. From brand new legacy characters to turning traditional ones on their head, writers have had little fear in messing with the status quo. Many times, such changes and plot twists have been greeted with acclaim and renewed interest. Others have led to countless debating among all us superfans. With all that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are the 10 most important comic book moments of the decade. 10. The Dark Knights. Following up their immensely popular and often controversial run on Batman, the dynamic duo of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo paired up for a truly bonkers Batman-centric event. Dark Knight Metal introduced us to the Dark Multiverse, a grim subversion of the more routine DC multiverse. Fiddling about with mystery metals deep in the tunnels of his Batcave, Bruce Wayne inadvertently opens a portal to the Dark Multiverse, prompting mass chaos universe-wide. Surreal, unpredictable, and surprising, the Dark Universe Batmen were many things. Most importantly, however, they show us the level of destruction and pain a figure like Bruce Wayne could cause if he ever were to succumb to evil. In the process, Snyder hammered home that Batman's as dangerous and as brilliant as even the most superpowered of DC characters. In doing so, the team portrayed Batman in an even darker light than usual. 9. The Reveal. The most recent entry on this list, Clark Kent just took off his spectacles in front of the world. A custom of current writer Brian Michael Bendis, Superman is now without a secret identity. It's much too soon in this story arc to throw around predictions of where Superman goes from here, but based on the other characters who've made this call, Supes' friends and family might be in for a spot of bother. With Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom focused on Clark's earth-shattering announcement, it looks like they may be gearing up to interfere in Clark's life. Just read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow to get a good idea of how badly that can go. Regardless of how dark, or indeed light, Clark's journey into the public identity world is, it's safe to say the very essence of the character just suffered a major paradigm shift. Clark Kent represented Superman's efforts to live peacefully among his adopted peoples, a testament to his respect for Earth and his in-touch bond with the mortals he fights for. With all that seemingly gone, it's going to be a very different series at the very least. 8. All New, All Different. In just the blink of an eye, everything you thought you knew can change. Look no further than Marvel's All New, All Different campaign, a 2015 enterprise that still sends shockwaves throughout Marvel Comics to this day. Out with the old, in with the new as Sam Wilson took over Captain America's mantle, Jane Foster lifted Mjolnir, Dr. Amadeus Cho found himself in possession of a big green friend, and countless other major characters saw themselves replaced with fresh legacy iterations. Controversial and unpredictable, Marvel's clean sweep of new takes lead to several new titles launching and shocking renditions of classic figures, including one-armed unworthy Thor, age catching up with Steve Rogers, and a transcended AI Tony Stark. A turning point and talking point surrounding Marvel and the comic books world in general, All New, All Different was a reminder of how unpredictable our favorite heroes' journeys can get. 7. The Death of Wolverine. In 2014, Marvel took its most famous and popular X-Man and straight up killed him. It was especially surprising given Wolverine's whole thing is that his regenerative powers make him all but unkillable. The death of the hairy Canadian proved a huge deal, even being reported on in mainstream circles of pop cultural news. From the 10,000 times Hugh Jackman portrayed the character on screen to being endlessly marketed as the premier star of X-Men in comics, Wolverine was beloved by the masses and his death hit many readers hard. In a comic book miniseries bluntly titled The Death of Wolverine, Wolverine suffers a huge loss in life. His healing factor goes kaput. Now as vulnerable and mortal as any 5'3" super assassin from the American Civil War days, Logan struggles to get by and ultimately passes on in an exceptionally unpleasant way. Covered head to toe in cooling adamantium, encasing his body in indestructible metal. 6. The Joker gets a facelift. The Joker's always been one of DC's sickest and most twisted characters, notorious for the sadistic crimes he inflicts on others. But what about the heinous horrors he subjects himself to? Meeting up with the dollmaker in Arkham, Joker arranges to have his own face cut off and nailed to a wall. Cutting it off as a symbolic thing for his latest showdown with Batman, Faceless Joker was a major promotional tactic for DC during the best-selling Death of the Family story arc in 2012. It also remained a pivotal aspect of the character for years to come, even after he regained his face in Endgame. 5. Hail Hydra. Oh boy. Of all the big moments in Marvel Comics this decade, nothing was quite so shocking as Steve Rogers turning Steve-ul and being revealed as a member of Hydra. A member, that is, since the beginning, totally undermining every aspect of the character and leaving us to question every tale he's ever partaken in. Of course, it was eventually revealed to be a ruse, memories implanted by that dastardly Red Skull, but by then, it was too late and Rogers was completely immersed in villainy for some time to come. Before the Red Skull explanation, Captain Hydra was possibly the biggest pulling the rug out from under us moment Marvel has ever done. It left readers and even non-readers everywhere asking all sorts of questions, including whether or not such an outrageous plotline might find its way into one of Chris Evans' movies. And as we all know, Hail Hydra eventually found its way in. 4. Cyclops turns heel. Cyclops had always been a rather polarizing figure among X-fans, highly strung, always preventing that ever sought-after Wolverine Jean Grey romance, and woefully misused in most film outings. He was a surprisingly problem-laden lead character. During the seminal Avengers vs. X-Men event in 2012, Cyclops goes on a serious path of self-destruction in the wake of Steve Rogers taking Hope Summers into custody due to her Phoenix-bearing potential. War breaks out between Marvel's two biggest teams soon after, and eventually most characters come to unite against a Phoenix-enhanced mega-threat, Cyclops. Confronted by Professor X, Cyclops refuses to start behaving again and ultimately murders his mentor in front of most of Marvel's major heroes. Subsequently, Cyclops is defeated and locked up for his brutal actions, though he takes solace in the apparent rebirth of mutant kind left behind in his wake. Cyclops gradually moved from villainy to anti-heroism to heroism once again, though has remained a far darker, more complicated character ever since. 3. The New 52. By October 2010, the head honchos of DC Comics had grown increasingly concerned by a noticeable downward spiral in regards to their sales. Getting their heads together, they decided the best way to correct course was simply to Control-Alt-Delete, ending every last one of their comics via the decisive Flashpoint event. Everything began anew with issue 1s. One of the characters to undergo the most change in the New 52 was the original face of DC himself, Superman. The affable, all-American Kryptonian was replaced by a younger, much meaner version that continued the divide amongst fans regarding the company-wide reboot. While many good ideas floated throughout this time, the New 52 has ultimately come to be reviewed as a bit of a hot mess by many, despite its game-changing effects on DC Comics as a whole. 2. Miles Morales. A hero isn't the one who always wins, it's the one who always tries. That's a nice little quote from Miles Morales and sums up many of the key themes comprising his hero's journey since his most publicized debut back in 2011. In the wake of Peter Parker's tragic death, Morales takes up the mantle of Spider-Man. While holding several similarities to his predecessor, Morales' life story and history offer some stark contrasts as well. Along with being featured in the blockbusting Spider-Man PS4 game last year, Morales was also the primary protagonist in the Academy Award-winning Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. An overall hit with readers and critics, Morales opened the door to greater diversity in superhero titles, and other media for that matter, everywhere. 1. The Manhattan Transfer. DC Rebirth was the latest in a long line of continuity crises DC has used to revamp their long-running characters. Initially centered around stolen time, DC Rebirth prompts several heroes to investigate just who or what could be responsible for a series of bizarre alterations to their reality. After a bunch of characters get vaporized, we, the readers, get our first clue as to who it may be. Watchmen had always been a completely separate entity to the rest of DC Comics, and at the time it still seemed rather implausible that that may change. Nevertheless, Dr. Manhattan was revealed as the big bad of DC Rebirth, and with it came a slew of huge changes, including the introduction of more Watchmen cast members to the DCU. Watchmen has received renewed interest in the past couple of years thanks to the good Doctor hijacking the lives of our favourite DC heroes and the highly acclaimed HBO series that premiered last year. As seminal and clever now as it was when it was published, Watchmen's introduction to the superhero mainstream has proven a chaotic and controversial ride thus far. And there you have it, folks, the 10 most important comic book moments of the last decade. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @uSlideDialU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.